I'm Elisabet Barnes, and I run Ultra Coach, which is a coaching business that I have had for quite a long time now. So I'm an ultra endurance runner. I specialize in multi-stage races. I guess you could say I'm retired from that now because I haven't done it competitively for a few years. But before then, I did a lot of races, and I did the Grand to Grand in 2016. And Colin was kind enough to remind me that I still have the second fastest time of a woman ever in the race. So that was quite fun.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. That record's held for a long time.
Yeah, I know. I was like, oh, I didn't know that. Thanks for telling me. I have run almost all my life. I started running ultramarathons in 2011, did my first multi-stage race in 2012, which was the Marathon des Sables. And pretty much since around that time, I've been a running coach, and I've coached now, it's a lot of runners for these types of races, and yeah, I love it. It's great, and so I'm excited to come on board as a coach for Grand to Grand now.
Yeah, it is really cool. Like all your experience in just like, if you want to call it normal running, as in like single day races, and then like stage racing, like, you have a lot of experience doing these events.
Yeah, I do. I run in not quite on all continents, but we're getting there. And I've done deserts, high mountains, rainforests, and so I have accumulated a lot of experience over the years. And yeah, I guess I know what it's like to take on a challenge like this. And it is about so much more than just getting, fit to run or walk if that's what you do. But really, there are so many factors around everything, and obviously gear that we're going to talk about today is a big one. So, yeah.
Yeah, the gear part of stage racing is really interesting because like when I started running, I think like most people, you kind of start doing like maybe shorter road races or trail races. And then even if you do an ultra race, it's still very different gear wise than it is running a stage race. So that is what we're going to talk about today, is like choosing the gear, because I think a lot of people probably are a little nervous about a stage race simply because of the gear aspect, because it's a lot more involved and intense than just running a 50K or a marathon or something. So let's talk a little bit about that. Like where do you start when choosing gear to run a stage race?
Well, first of all, you go to the kit list and the organizer's official kit list, and you look at the mandatory items. Like that's your number one, because it's really important to make sure you have everything you need and that you comply with the regulations. And then I know in the case of Grand to Grand, there is also an additional kit list, which is like, okay, here are the things that are not compulsory, but which we recommend. And I've looked at that list, and I think it's actually very sensible. So you have a good starting point for Grand to Grand if you look at those lists. But then, as with most races, those lists don't really tell you very much about exactly what item is suitable, because when we do these races, it's really, really important to go as light as possible, and you almost have to become obsessed. Obsessed with your kit. You can't just go into like a regular camping shop and go, oh, I need a backpack, because they are not going to have a clue what you need, and so it does get very specific in order to get the weight down. But getting the weight down is critical, because otherwise you're going to have an extremely hard week or you won't finish. So, and that's, I guess, where I come into the picture, because I've done this so many times. Like, I know what you need, and so that's why we're here, right?
Exactly. And just real quick, the other day I was running with a friend who he runs professionally and coaches full time, and runs, I guess. But I was asking him, like, why do people pay you so much? Because he definitely charges a premium for his coaching. And he explained it to me as just like, well, basically, you can fast track all the misery or avoid all the misery of just learning yourself and just be where you want to be a lot faster. So instead of taking 5 to 6 years of just failing, 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 and finally learning, you can pay a coach and then you just know all these things instantly. And it just makes running so much more enjoyable. And I'd never thought about it that way before. And I'm like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because I've definitely learned a lot through trial and error, and it's a hard process.
It is a hard process, and some people love it, because it can be a fun process, especially if you're towards the nerdy side. It can be great fun, but then you can also make huge mistakes, and that's really unnecessary. And yeah, I think as coaches, we, at least the coaches who run the races that they coach for, we collect all this experience over time, and people might go, oh yeah, that's quite an expensive coach, like I can get this other coach cheaper. Yeah, but it's not about your training plan. Any coach can give you a training plan. You don't pay for an hour or for a month. You pay for decades of experience. So, and that really is worth a lot, because it can save you many hours of research and many mistakes in the process. And these races are not cheap either, so they are a big investment. And the feeling of the feeling of success and accomplishment when you finish, that, like, does that even have a price? So I think it's really worth doing what you can to get there prepared, whether that is with a coach or without a coach, but it's really important.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So I guess jumping off of that, then let's just start with the basics of equipment for a race like Grand to Grand. So like, how do you choose a pack? Because like you were saying, if you walked into a camping store, like us in the US, we have REI, which is pretty big, for example. They're going to have a million different types of like backpacking bags and running vests and things, but those aren't exactly ideal for a stage race.
Yeah, so a backpack for a stage race is it's a little bit specific. So I think it should be in the region of 20 to 30 liters. I'm doing the metric system, by the way, so I hope that's okay, because otherwise I'm going to be very confused here. So 20 to 30 liter backpack. You really do not need any more than that. 20 could be on the small side for some, and 30 is on the big side for some. But if you go over, what you risk doing is filling your pack with things that you don't need. So that's the first thing. And then when you do a race like this, it's important to eat and drink during each stage. And so we want to have easy access to water. And the most practical way of drinking, I think, is to have a couple of hard bottles, like think typical kind of cycling bottles of about 750 milliliters. And you have two of those, equates to 1.5 liter. And you just want to store them easily. And so backpacks like this, they typically have bottle holders on the front where you can just put your bottles. And then a few pockets for things you need to have accessible as you run. And that typically includes your snacks for the stage, maybe access to a little bit of loo roll if you need to go into the bushes, perhaps the compass, if that should be required during a particular stage. So those are sort of the things that you want to have accessible, some electrolytes perhaps. So we're looking at that. We're looking at those features basically. And if you go into like a regular camping store, what you will probably find is that the backpacks don't have the bottle holders, many of them. And they may not have so many front pockets. So that's one problem. And then you might say, well, could you have a bladder in the back? And yes, you could have that. And some people do have that. And so I'm not saying it's impossible, but it depends where it sits, because when your backpack is full, it's going to take you a long time to not only take that out, but then once you've filled it, you're going to try to get that in again. And so at every checkpoint, you're going to add a lot of faff and time. And so that can be quite costly. And then it's a little bit more difficult to keep clean than hard bottles. So I'm almost starting to talk about hydration, but I think I just want to make this point because it's a really important feature of the backpack. And so these packs tend to be made by more specialist brands who are maybe more big in kind of ultra running or have a niche there, rather than sort of the camping brands.
Yeah, definitely. And like, I think that's one of the
brands.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the most critical pieces of gear too. And I think a lot of people just think of it as like, oh, it's just a backpack, but really it's kind of like you're home for the week.
Yeah, it is. It is your home for the week, and you also need to be able to move with it comfortably, because otherwise it can be really annoying. So all backpacks don't fit on all people. So you might find yourself starting out with one backpack, and then you realize, I don't like this or I don't like that, or it bounces when I run, and then maybe you need to change the model. And so the backpack is actually the thing that I recommend that people buy first out of all of their kit, so that they can just start to get used to it, and see if they like it, and see if it might need tweaking or if it might just need, replacing with another pack.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's very individualized for each person. Like a backpack that fits me, like you're saying, might not fit you because our body types are a little bit different, whether that's your height or just different things, how we feel is comfortable. And I think that also applies a lot to socks and shoes, as they're a very personal preference, where a shoe that I might really love, you may hate yourself, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So with your shoes, I think for the Grand, I would recommend a trail shoe, because the ground in some places is, it's not as smooth. You don't just run in the desert. There is some rocky terrain, and you actually spend quite a lot of time on the course as well. So, even the fastest runners in Grand are like at least 30 hours. And I think most people are around, if you're in the middle, maybe you're around sort of 50 hours, right? So your shoes kind of need to be a bit robust, and comfortable. You need to train with them. So I would say a trail shoe is good. And like you said, is it good for you? It needs to fit you. And when there is a chance of, or risk, or how to put it, crossing a stream or something, which at least we did that in 2016. It happened because it rained. I would advise to have a shoe that where like basically the water can come out if you have to go into water. So I never recommend Gore-Tex shoes, because then the water like stays in. You don't want that. So a good breathable shoe. Because you might decide you want to have a gaiter on it, and then the gaiter reduces the breathability. So yeah, robust but breathable, with some toe protection, a good outer sole with some, decent grip, but you don't have to go overboard with that. And then roomy toe box, because your feet are going to take a lot of pounding, and so they might swell a little bit during the week. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think most people's feet do swell a bit. Plus, like you're saying, it is really warm out there. It's really sandy, and there's potential for water. There's a few places even during the dry years where you could potentially get wet feet, or even just have really sweaty feet throughout the day because it gets pretty warm.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's also where the socks come in. Like, you really want to have, would say, good quality socks, and there are probably as many sock preferences as there are people out there. So many socks can be great, but I would just say, like, invest in good quality socks, and your main choices are to go for either a toe sock, or just a normal regular sock. A lot of people like the toe socks, and they can reduce friction between the toes and maybe absorb a bit of extra sweat. So I I think that makes them a popular choice.
Yeah, so thinking about like just friction and stuff reminds me about chafing. How chafing is always very common. You see people with like the tape on their backs and everything because it just happens out there. But how do we choose like the proper set of clothing for the race? Because I've seen everything from cotton t-shirts to full on like normal jackets, not puffy jackets, all these different types of clothing out there. But it's a very like dynamic race temperature wise because there's very hot days, then there's also very cold nights. So how do you pick the right type of clothing for a race like this?
Yeah, so in terms of the running, if we look at like the day stages, if I don't talk about the long stage for now, but I would go for the running, I would go with shorts or short tights and a t-shirt. But I think that, if you prefer to have long tights, that's okay. If you prefer to have long sleeves, that's okay. But I would go for a thin material, and because you can have some changes in temperature, I would be inclined to go for a very lightweight merino, actually. I find that merino is a really nice material that sort of, if it's like thin, it doesn't make you cool. Even if you've sweated and it gets a bit cooler, you actually, you still feel okay. Whereas if you have a more kind of synthetic plastic type running t-shirt, like when you get sweaty, they can feel really, really cold. It can be a bit uncomfortable in temperature changes. So, but something lightweight that wicks away moisture, that is of good quality. That's what I would pick. Because another factor that comes in is when you have a t-shirt or a shirt, like whether it's loose fitting or tight fitting, and you have the backpack and you do these really long days, you can also get chafing in places. And sometimes you get chafing from the seams of a shirt. So it's really important to train with whatever you pick. Sometimes a loose fitting t-shirt in combination with a certain backpack can start to ride up from the movement of the backpack. And so then that's of course really annoying, having to go and pull down a t-shirt, all the time. And so you really need to test everything in training to be aware of what fits and what doesn't fit. And it's like the whole combination of everything.
Yeah.
And I would probably go for a light color as well. I mean, if you see pictures of me from Grand 2016, I was all black, but I also had like sponsor gear to think about, and I chose that, and it was fine because the t-shirt was quite thin and loose fitting. But I think I would go for something more like light color, at least the top, and then it's good to have some kind of cap, maybe with a neck flap. Because again, the days are really long, the sun can be strong, and I have found that it makes a difference if you have something actually white on your head, at least if your natural hair color is a bit like mine is here. It actually makes a difference. So it's good to have a buff to hand, which can also be good. You can either sort of soak it in some water during the day if you need to cool yourself down, but it's also useful at night if you need to keep yourself a little bit warmer. So kind of multi-use. Yeah, that's probably what I would say for running. What do you see people mostly wearing in Grand to Grand? Would you say it is shorts and t-shirt, or how many people opt for something more long sleeved? Or
Yeah, mostly like shorts and t-shirts.
yeah,
The past little bit, I've seen people wear like the sun hoodies, like the longer t-shirts with like a hood on top. And I don't know, personally, I don't love those, especially while wearing a pack, but I can see why somebody would want that because it is sun protection without having to use sunscreen, which is like kind of nice
yeah,
because sunscreen gets so sticky and greasy.
yeah. It can do, for sure. That's also what I like about actually having some kind of cap, because then you're more protected around your eyes, and you don't have to use so much sun cream, because when you sweat and if that gets in your eyes, it gets really uncomfortable.
Yeah, and you're definitely gonna sweat at Grand to Grand because it's always hot.
Yeah, yeah, you're gonna sweat. Okay, cap people, we've established that.
It's very important. Oh man, what about jackets? Because I've seen people just bring like either no jacket because they assume it's the desert and it's warm, or they'll bring a very heavy jacket. But a down jacket for me seems like the best option, where it's very you can pack it down really small, but it's also very warm for the amount of weight.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say a very lightweight down jacket, or the synthetic equivalent for those people who don't want to choose down for whatever reason. They're actually the synthetic options used to be really heavy in comparison, but they're not anymore. There's some really good synthetic options. So you can get a light jacket that is down or synthetic, but the point is it should be very packable and lightweight, and a good lightweight down jacket weighs in the region of like 150 grams, right? So if you find a jacket that weighs 400 grams and you think like it's really light, then I'm going to tell you it's not. So, so I just want to sort of give people an idea. When we say light, like what do we mean? So if it is 250, is that a disaster? No, absolutely not. And of course, we're all different body sizes, and the weight of our clothes will vary accordingly. But the really lightweight down jackets are in that region in terms of weight. And it's a really useful thing to have, because it's really nice to have it in the morning when you wake up, when it's cold. It's really nice to have it in the evening. And if you want some extra warmth sleeping, you can wear it when you sleep. And if you sit down at the checkpoint during the long stage at night, or something, maybe you want to put that on. So for me, I think a down jacket is something I've taken to almost all my stage races, unless I have known that it's going to be quite warm. So I have had some other solutions, but I think for Grand to Grand, it's compulsory to have one anyway, right? So you kind of need to have it. But what you can also consider, in addition, I can't remember if this is compulsory to have or not, but a lightweight. You have to have a waterproof jacket, right? I think I remember that. So then, if let's assume if that is the case, I think that is the case. But then you go for a really lightweight waterproof jacket. You can also use that as a wind jacket if for whatever reason that would be necessary. Maybe you want to put something extra on during the long stage if you're out late. Then you can do that. So I personally probably wouldn't go for many other spare tops and things like that. I think that's a bit honest.
Yeah, definitely. And thinking about weight, like a 400-gram jacket compared to 150 grams, like it may not seem like that much, but when you add on other things on top of that, eventually your pack gets really heavy. And so that just reminds me a lot about people's cooking gear that they bring, because I've seen people bring full on like metal cups and like just cooking stuff that you might take camping, like at a campground or in your car. But when you have to carry that stuff for a week, that gets very annoying and very heavy. So like, what kind of tips do you have for people as far as like bringing stuff to cook their meals with at camp?
Yeah. So you get hot water at camp, so you don't need a stove. So it makes it quite simple. So for eating meals, you pretty much have, I would say, two options. It depends what food you bring, and of course, like people can bring a wide variety of types of food, but it's quite common to bring freeze-dried meals. And so freeze-dried meals come ready packed in a bag, and you can eat your meal from the bag. And so it is an option to do that and not take anything to prepare your meal with. You just pour the hot water in the bag and you eat your meal. There is, however, the consideration that the packaging for these meals is actually quite heavy, because there is the bag and then there is a little pouch inside that is there to keep the food fresh. And so if you add up the weight of those two, which I have done many times, and you multiply that by the number of meals you need to have, you go like, oh, that's a couple of 100 grams. And so if you repackage your food to save on that weight and to save on volume, which you can do if you repackage your food, then you have to eat your food from something. And so then that can either be if you vacuum pack your food, it can be the vacuum bag you pack in if you sort of don't make it too small when you pack your food, or you bring some kind of pot that is also relatively easy to clean, so you don't have to waste water in camp. And then I would say you could either bring a very lightweight titanium pot. So they don't weigh much at all, actually. Or another thing is that you can take a very lightweight, like little plastic jar with a lid, like the type if you go and buy some sort of cheap peanut butter, they can come in this plastic jar that quite thin. And so as long as that is food safe, I mean, in theory, you could take something like that and put your food in, put the hot water in, screw the lid on, and let it sit for a while to rehydrate, and you could eat your meal from that. But you probably need you need something to eat your food from, but stay away from the regular sort of heavy camping gear with thick plastic or steel. Like, it weighs too much. And for eating, I love the titanium long handle spoons. So they weigh, I can't remember exactly now, but let's say it's like between 10 and 20 grams, like maybe 18 grams or something, or maybe it's 9, I don't know. Anyway, it's lightweight, and it's got a long handle, and it's very easy to clean. And with the long handle, you avoid getting your fingers in your food. So that's like a hygiene consideration.
That's something that I think a lot of people don't think about. Is maybe it's 2 extra grams to have the long handle, but it keeps your hands clean. It keeps everything cleaner. Then it's just better. It's worth it.
Yeah, it is better. I mean, it's like, okay, you cut your toothbrush so short that you end up with your fingers in your mouth. Like, again, like, it's like it doesn't make sense. Like, so.
Yeah, it gets kind of gross sometimes to see things that people do, because if you just go to the bathroom, then you're brushing your teeth with your fingers essentially, and then eating with those same fingers, it gets really gross really fast.
Yeah, and people go like, "Oh, I got a bad stomach. There was a stomach bug in camp. I don't know what happened." And you're like, "Yeah, no, I know what happened."
Yeah, we know exactly what happened. Oh my
So
gosh.
yeah, hygiene is really, really important, and so there is definitely like the sort of the trade-off between the weight and like what's hygienic, and also between the weight and what's practical, like in general. So yeah, weight isn't everything. It's important, but you have to maintain common sense when you shape the weight of your kit.
Definitely. So thinking about weight, and as far as food goes, like certain foods have like a way higher caloric density than other foods. So like what's kind of like a typical, like just to say like a random day at Grand to Grand, like what would be a typical meal for you while you're out there?
Okay, so I'm going to go from memory. I was going to say something general. I could have brought up my food plan, but I didn't. But for breakfast, I would probably have I would definitely have coffee. I would have it cold, and I would have maybe some porridge, probably, or some oat cakes with peanut butter. So I might bring peanut butter in the single portion sachets. So something like that. Perhaps if I have that, maybe I'll complement it with a bit of protein shake or meal replacement shake or something like that. And then for running the stage, I will keep one bottle with only water, and then in the other bottle I will have some kind of carbohydrate mix, but I will make it quite weak, but I will have it. And I will make sure I get my electrolytes in as well, whether that is capsules or tablets or whatever that is. And then I will have some snacks, and they will be mostly carbohydrate based. So yeah, it could be just regular sweets that I like, or it could be some sports nutrition product, maybe some sort of jelly cubes or something like that, that is easily digestible when running. And if it is the long stage, I will add on other things to that maybe have more salt, more fat, more protein, especially the second half. But other than the long stage, it's mainly carbohydrate based for the running, because that's what I run best on and what most people need when they run. If you're a walker, you might go at a little bit lower intensity. It might also be easier to eat, let's say, a bar. But chewing a bar when running is or when trying to run fast, is like not typically a very good thing to do. So walkers might have more choice, let's say. When I finish, I will have a recovery shake, so protein, carbohydrates, and then I will have dinner, so that will be some kind of freeze-dried meal and maybe a little extra snack. And I would say that a typical day for me would be in the region of 3,000 calories. Let's say 2,800 maybe to 3,000 calories. And then I would add on 1,000 calories for the long stage.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So then thinking about just like being at camp after you like had your dinner and stuff, like how do you plan a proper sleep setup? Because this is another thing that I've seen a lot of like issues with people, where they'll either bring a really light sleeping bag and they're cold all night, or they bring a really heavy sleeping bag and they struggle carrying a 2 to 3 pound sleeping bag during the day. So like what kind of advice do you have for people to plan a proper sleep setup?
Yeah, so it's a little bit difficult because I think it's impossible for anyone to predict in advance exactly what is that week going to be like. You know, the weather can always play games on us. But one thing you have in Grand to Grand is, you know, the tents are closed. So you have good protection from the weather and you don't really need to worry about a lot of wind, which can make it colder. So so there is a minimum requirement for the sleeping bag. And I think that is the 0 Celsius rating, 32 Fahrenheit rating. Now that can be any rating. So the extreme rating is accepted, which means that a sleeping bag has different rating. It has the extreme, it has the limit, and it has the comfort rating, and they mean different things. And so if you go and look at a sleeping bag and you say, oh yeah, but the extreme rating is 0, so that's okay. Yeah, but what does an extreme rating mean? It means that somebody can barely survive in that bag for 6 hours, right? And so that's not like a comfortable night's sleep. But I think that if you, again, it's like with the down jacket, right? You want to go light, right? A light sleeping bags, they have a number, which is a fill power, and it's basically telling you how fluffy the down is. And the fluffier the down is, the more air it traps, which means that you can fill it with less down and still have the same warmth in a bag that has a high quality down filling than a bag that has a low quality down filling. So when you have the high quality down, then you can get away with a lightweight sleeping bag. And I would say that for this race, I would probably go with a sleeping bag that weighs in the region of 350 to 600 grams. I don't think you have to go over 600 grams if you can buy the good quality sleeping bag. And again, it comes down to budget, because sleeping bags can be very expensive. So if, the compromise is that you go with a heavier bag that doesn't have like quite the same quality, or that has a synthetic filling perhaps, but you get the same warmth.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that was confusing or if that makes sense. But But yeah, again, to compare with the jacket, I said 150 grams for the jacket. I say 350 to 600 grams for the sleeping bag.
Yeah, and like just an example, like I have a 32-degree sleeping bag, like Fahrenheit. And like when I bought it, I was like, oh, perfect. It'll be great for temps when they're at freezing temperatures. But it's the survivability rating is 32 degrees. And so
Yeah,
like when I go out bikepacking or something and it's say 50 degrees, it's barely warm enough to like keep me warm at night. And I've
yeah.
taken it out on days where it's freezing cold and I'm shivering the entire night because it allows you to survive, but you're not comfortable. You're just able to not die.
Yeah, exactly. And sleep is getting a good night's sleep, as much as that is possible, is really, really important in a stage race because it is a stage race. And so you have to basically be sort of as fresh as you can for 7 days. And so one success factor is how well can you recover from one day to the next. So let's say, okay, we have the sleeping bag. And a lot of people actually ignore the sleeping mat. They just look at it as something that, is there for a bit of cushion, but it's not. Sleeping mats also have a rating. So sleeping mats can also be insulating if you want to. So that means that they protect you from the cold of the ground, and your sleeping bag and your mat together create this sleep system. So that is also important because the same sleeping bag without the sleeping mat or with a warmer sleeping mat will also make a difference. And it is compulsory to have a sleeping mat anyways. You can't escape it, but you can think about that. Okay, so what sleeping mat can I pick that maybe also gives me not only a little bit of cushioning under my bones, but also actually a little bit of warmth. So that's a factor. And when it comes to the sleeping mat, you basically have the option of foam or inflatable, and there are pros and cons with each. An inflatable can provide a bit more cushioning, but if it punctures, it can be difficult to find and fix the hole. So that's the downside with the inflatable mats. And then maybe you want to have a pillow. So there are really small inflatable pillows you can buy. They're very lightweight. That's an option. Or you can maybe sleep on what's left in your backpack. Or I have used my shoes to sleep on them.
It's a very
Or
sanitary pillow choice.
or maybe you have a stuff sack, perhaps, or like a dry bag, and then perhaps there are some things you can put in the dry bag that you could, it could make you use that as a pillow. And yeah, ideally, we don't have a lot of extra stuff in our backpack, right? So if you've done things right, your backpack is going to be a really uncomfortable pillow.
I would definitely agree with that. Well, Elisabet, as we kind of wrap up here, as far as I understand, you've come on as a coach now for Grand to Grand, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so no, I had a chat with Colin, and I'm on board as a coach, which I think is really great actually, because I generally coach a lot of runners for the Marathon des Sables, and I have coached some people for Grand to Grand over the years, but not very many. So it would be really exciting if there were some more people who wanted to get on board. And what I've done is I have created a package. So it's really simple. I take all your guesswork away. I take your research away, unless you want to do it yourself, I will let you, but you don't have to. And so it's a bespoke 5 months training plan, and then, plenty of support to make sure that people are prepared with everything that goes around that. So, heat acclimation, foot care, shoe choice, gear choice, race nutrition, Did I say heat acclimation? Maybe I did. Yeah, I don't know. So all of these things and your mental preparation. So that starts in April, so 5 months before the race.
Awesome. So if people are interested in coaching or just following you on social media, where can they find you?
Yeah, so my website is ultra.coach, and I'm also ultra.coach on Instagram. So that should hopefully keep it simple enough. Or drop me an email at elisabet@ultra.coach.
All right. Sounds easy enough to find you then.
I hope so.
Cool. Thanks again for your time. I really appreciate it. That was really informative and interesting. I think people will take a lot out of this.
Yeah, I hope so. A little sort of whistle stop tour of various things. Hopefully useful for people to start thinking about this stuff and get some tips. So.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks again, and we'll have to talk soon.
Great. Look forward to it.